Okay, so before we go to the next section, I'd like to I'd like to explain something. I'd like to explain what flow is biologically in a simple way. I'd like to explain the biological signature, I guess, for flow states and altered states. And obviously, there is this um, the explanation is based on what Stephen and Jamie say in their books and in their talks, and obviously I'm not explaining it as if it's fact. I'm explaining it as the current understanding and what they believe to be the case. So, what flow is then is a few things going on in the brain. One thing is that we experience transient hypofrontality. That is the dimming of the prefrontal cortex, and that is the cause of they believe is the cause of the feelings of selflessness and timelessness. Then another thing that can occur is the feeling of unity, and that they believe is caused by a similar phenomenon to transient hypofrontality. That is, during periods of high concentration, an exchange of energy occurs in the brain, and an area called the orientation area, or the right temporoparietal junction, or lobe, experiences dimmed activity, and the result being that you can no longer calculate where your body ends and the outside world begins, and you are forced to conclude that you are one with the with the rest of the world. Then the next part of the signature is that during flow states or altered states, you get a cocktail of two or more of the six most potent and pleasurable neurochemicals the brain can produce. Those being norepinephrine, dopamine, endorphins, anandamide, serotonin, and oxytocin. And those bring out the feelings, the effortless feeling. There's no need to be. You don't need to motivate yourself to do something, to do an activity where you find flow or an altered state, because it's intrinsically rewarding. And yes, and then the last indicator is that your brain waves move from beta waves, your habitual waves, to alpha, to theta, and sometimes to gamma waves. Um, and 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 all of these phenomena um, all of these phenomena, all of these processes and neurochemical phenomena help in um, causing the state of richness that you feel. Okay, so the next section we're going to talk about is, why does flow matter? Why should I be listening to this video? Why should I care? Why does flow matter? And so I'll be giving roughly three reasons why it matters. And the first is an argument given by Stephen and Jamie in their book Stealing Fire from the Gods. They work off this principle. Peter Drucker, a management guru, said that to identify what someone truly values and truly desires, we need look at what they spend their money on and what they put into their calendar, and that's where we will find their values. So Stephen and Jamie took this approach, and they said basically. Their theory was that we spend more money and more time doing chasing altered states, chasing relief from the self than we realize. They used the uh, the flow state signature that I just explained, the the idea that flow states and altered states are a cocktail of the six most potent neurochemicals and are identified by hypotransient by transient hypofrontality, by brain waves moving from beta to alpha to theta, and sometimes from this feeling of oneness. So they used that as their filter, and they looked at a wide range of experiences and activities and hobbies to identify how much money are we spending on chasing altered states, on chasing relief from the self. Um, yeah, that was their question, and they theorized that we are spending more money and more time chasing these altered states than we realize, and that's partly because we don't realize uh, just how many of our activities and pursuits fall into the category of altered states. So they and they wanted to quantify how much exactly, or not exactly, but they wanted to quantify how much money we are spending on chasing these altered states. So in their calculation, they included the markets for caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, um, and illegal substances like cocaine, uh, opiates, and methamphetamines. They included the illegal markets for marijuana, uh, Ritalin and Adderall, and the markets for Oxycontin and Vicodin, which are mood shifters. They also included the market for self help, psychology, and psychiatry, because the selling point for self help, psychology, and psychiatry is helping you to get out of your head and to become happier. Then they also looked at activities that are intrinsically rewarding, like gambling, extreme sports like surfing and skiing, among others, and video gaming. They also looked at the music industry, and although it can be argued that that all live music is about the collective experience, um, and about losing yourself in the experience, they kind of uh, narrowed down and specifically looked at EDM, electronic dance music. They say in their book that EDM doesn't have lyrics, it doesn't have a band. What it's about is uh, loud bass, the light show, and mind-altering drugs. And they say in the book that in 2014, EDM concert sales made up half of the worldwide concert ticket sales. Then they looked at the film and media industry. Specifically, they looked at IMAX and 3D movies. Their question was, why do people make the decision to watch an IMAX movie or a 3D movie rather than wait 3 months and watch that movie at home? And what they said is you watch a movie at the theater because you want the surround sound, you want the the hundreds of other people watching around you, um, oohing and eyeing at the same time that you do. They said that what you pay for is immersion, and you pay to feel more and think less. Then they looked at the porn industry. They say in the book that 33% of all searches on the internet are related to sex, and 7 of the top 20 websites on the internet are porn sites. They say that um, uh, real sex, analog sex, there has evolutionary benefits. But what are the benefits of digital sex? They say that digital sex is a mixture of physiological arousal and neurochemical saturation. So they say that people watch porn not to get laid, but to get high. Next, they looked at social media. This was kind of an interesting one. This they didn't say how they quantified, and in their notes in the book, they also didn't say how they quantified. So I'm not sure how they did that. Perhaps they did something where they used the time spent on social media and multiplied that by some kind of wage, minimum wage, I guess. So what they said is that when we use social media, when we check our phone or email or messaging and we don't get a message, and then the next time we check it, we get a message, we get something like a 400% spike in dopamine. And this can be distracting to the point of being addictive. So using Drucker's idea of how much are people spending on these activities and in these industries, and how much time are they spending on these things, they came to the value of about $4 trillion a year, which is being spent in their words, chasing altered states, chasing relief from the self. And they say that this is more than the GNP, the gross national product of Britain or of Russia or of India. They say that it's 2 times the known galaxies in the universe, and it's 1/16 of the total global economy per year. And yeah, so I looked at the notes in the back of the book to see how they calculated this, and they're very thorough, and you can go and look in the notes if you're interested in how they calculated it. They seemed quite conservative, and they say this in some of their talks. With their calculation, they didn't adjust the 4 trillion to $2016 when the book was published, and for some of the industries, they could only find numbers from America, and instead of making an estimation for the world value in that industry, they just used the American number to represent the world number. And they say in their talks and in the book, they say that it's a rough calculation, and they're open to feedback from anyone who has feedback to give. And what they say is that this amount of money that we are spending chasing altered states is a reflection of the fact that getting relief and finding a new perspective and getting into these flow states is an innate human desire. That's what they say. Remember that. So they say all the industries that I mentioned, they all have some of the qualities that define a flow state or an altered state, and our our um, our goal in going into these and spending money and time on these activities is to find relief, um, and gain and sometimes gain new perspectives. And um, they say that they're not trying to say that everyone goes into spends money and time on these activities knowing that, okay, I want a new perspective on my life, and so I'm going to do cocaine. That's not what they're saying. They're saying that a lot of it isn't deliberate. We just because we don't realize that we are chasing the same thing. That it's a very similar thing that we're chasing. Um, and yeah, so then in the podcast in the Aubrey Marcus podcast where Jamie appears, they talk about what the evolutionary benefit for an altered state might be, because their argument is that it's an innate human desire. So and they talk on that podcast. Aubrey and Jamie talk about how it's seen in the animal kingdom, where if there is an intoxicating fruit or food in the area, um, animals will frequently and habitually eat that food. So they talk about uh, baboons nibbling on ibo, which is the substance that ibogaine comes from, the root in Africa, and these dolphins. I believe it's some kind of um, fumes they get from a jellyfish. I don't recall exactly what it is, but basically there are these examples in nature of animals eating intoxicating foods, and they say, and the question is, well, why? Because when a dolphin is intoxicated, it's not helping the dolphin reproduce. It's not reproducing. It's not eating, and it's at that moment it's vulnerable to predators. Although a dolphin is high up on the food chain, so they say, why? What's the evolutionary benefit of doing this? And the same question can be said for us when we are in an altered state. Um, we are in that state. We are vulnerable. It's not helping us get food. It's not helping us reproduce necessarily. Um, and so why? Or like, what's the evolutionary benefit? And they suggest their theory, Jamie's theory at least. I haven't heard what Stevens is that getting a shift in perspective is the evolutionary benefit. Um, Injecting novelty into our lives, um, breaking up the patterns of thinking that we have, can help us long term in problem solving.